Today's episode is sponsored by Select Savory Seasonings. Have you ever noticed that most barbecue rubs on the market use sugar as the first or second ingredient? Worry no longer. With Select Savory Seasonings, they offer fresh, gourmet, small batch, sugar-free and additive-free seasonings and spices to help you make good, tasty food that is good for you so that you can lose weight, get healthy, and feel amazing. Check them out today at selectsavory.com and use coupon code PODCAST to receive 15% off your first order.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Simple Low Carb Lifestyle Podcast. Today we have Leanne Vogel with us. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Corey. I'm so excited.
It is great to have you and finally get to talk to you and, well, e-meet you anyway.
E-meet. That's how we're really doing life right now, right?
Yeah, maybe we'll get conferences back one of these days where we can all get together and have a big group hug.
Oh, I would love that so much. I was thinking of trade shows last night, actually. Do you remember trade shows? Those were great.
Yeah, now we're all just Zooming around the country, but not Zooming around the country, sadly.
But I'm bumped.
Exactly. So before this gets really out of hand, let's just start with your story. What got you into low carb and keto, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I studied nutrition in 2007 and I was a vegan at the time. I had gone off hormonal birth control and fast forward, 6 years at that point, and I still hadn't had a period. And so I thought that I had been doing everything right as a holistic nutritionist to get my period back, and it just wasn't coming back. And so then I found the ketogenic diet. I learned that it can actually help heal hormones and reset a lot of things. And so I figured with hormone weight gain, because my hormones were all over the place, I was a lot heavier. I was having food cravings all the time. I figured, why not? So I went from vegan to keto.
Yeah.
30 days, and it completely changed everything. I got off my ADHD medication. I lost the hormone weight gain very quickly. The inflammation went down significantly. My hormone profile started to adjust in the right way. Like it was at least going up. My hormones were going up, and that's what I wanted. And that's really how I found keto at the very beginning, was just because I had literally tried everything else. And I just had a hunch that maybe, possibly, that maybe this was the ticket. And I learned that a lot of things needed to be adjusted along the go. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. But that was really what called me toward the ketogenic diet, was to help my hormones and get my period back.
And I love how you say it took 30 days. That's what I tell anybody who's like, well, I don't know. It could kill me. It's like, it won't for 30 days. And after 30 days, you'll feel so good, you realize it won't kill you.
Yes. And I'm so glad you mentioned the 30-day piece, because up until day 21, I was actually feeling horrible. It was horrible. I thought, what am I doing? What did I do? I'm just going to make it to the 30 days. And it was the 21st or the 22nd day where I was at a conference, actually. It was for yoga at the time. And I had done yoga all day. And then I went whitewater paddle boarding. And then I climbed a mountain. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten anything all day today. I feel fantastic. And that was the beginning of my introduction to keto. So the first 21 days totally sucked.
Yep, it does. I tell people it'll take anywhere from 14 to 30 days. And it's like if you put the wrong gas in your car, it can run on diesel fuel, but it's going to it sputters. And then even once you put the proper gas in, it's going to take time to spit out all that old stuff. Well, for most of us, that's 20, 30, 40 years of bad fuel. So it's going to take you, it takes you a couple of weeks to adjust to get back to going, oh, this feels really good.
Completely.
Now, obviously, as a man, I don't understand a lot of the things we're going to discuss, but I've talked to lots of women in the last several weeks. So one thing that did catch my ear when I heard you on Trent Holbert's podcast was that somebody you would talk to had, you were talking about your hormones and, hey, I haven't had my cycle in a long time. And their response was, well, you're trying to have kids? No. Well, what's the problem? So what is the problem? Why is it important for women to have a normal, healthy cycle?
Yeah, yeah. And that was always, I'd go to doctors and they'd say, well, do you want to have kids? And I'd say, well, no. And they'd say, well, then why are you even here? If you don't want to have kids, you're not having your period. This is a blessing. And I think that's the issue, is that many, many women, and I was definitely in that camp. For the first couple of years, I really didn't care. I thought it was way better not to have a cycle. I could wear white pants whenever I wanted. I could swim whenever I wanted. It was way more convenient. And I think that's also the misconception that women have. Why one of the reasons why they go on hormonal birth control or IUDs is because they just don't want to cycle. But the beautiful thing about our cycle is that, you know, we'll spend hundreds of dollars on lab tests and this and that, trying to figure out what's going on with our bodies. But our cycle is such a beautiful depiction of what's going on in the inside. So if you're not getting a cycle on a monthly basis, it definitely tells us what's going on with your blood sugar, your body temperature, your blood pressure, your bone growth and issues with bones. It affects your immune function, your digestion, your mood, your stress, your sex drive, your energy, your tissues. If you're having issues with your skin, acne, saggy skin, feeling like you're aging too much, organs, just muscle growth. If you're going to the gym and you're not having the effects and you're like, what the heck? Your period informs that. All of your glands, whether or not you are gaining or losing weight, your hunger, your brain function. I mean, there's so many things that inform us when it comes to our period. So not only is it important to have a period, but it's important to have a healthy cycle. And I think a lot of us don't even know what that is. And we think that we should have like the pain and that we should have cravings and it should be this hot mess. But that's not the case either.
Yeah. My wife definitely was not low carb when we got married. And now that we've dedicated our lives to living a low carb keto diet, it's like, she's like, the differences between growing up and now are so dramatic. It's not, it's not as heavy. It's not as long. She's like, it's kind of nice. It doesn't have, like you said, the cravings, the pains, the aches, as much. I mean, obviously they're still there to some extent, but she's like, wow. And now she understands, it's what I want to say feeding myself, but what I was ingesting, because she wasn't feeding herself. We're not feeding ourselves properly. That was causing a lot of those problems.
Yes, completely. I know that when I get a little bit, I've been on keto now for 7 years this year. So like you get a little bit comfortable with things and I add a couple of things back. And when I'm in pain, those first 2 days of my cycle, if I'm like healed over in pain, I'm like, oh, why do I have ovaries? Why do I have a uterus? This sucks. It's 9 times out of 10. It's what I ate the weeks before leading up to that cycle. And it's like, I overdid the carbohydrates. I had that sugary thing I probably shouldn't have had. And so you can directly correlate the last couple of weeks to the cycle you're having. When you start to have a natural cycle, it becomes such a good reminder, like, ooh, yeah, I overdid the carbs, or I didn't move as much. I didn't have water as much. I wasn't doing my daily flaxseed. Like all these things can contribute. And it's such a great way, instead of spending hundreds of dollars on tests, you have this amazing thing that comes every month that tells you what you did.
It's like you were created to work like this. I mean, go figure.
What?
And,
Amen.
And it just crossed my mind, if there's men listening to this and they go, I don't want to hear it. If you're married, you need to listen. I'll just leave it at that. And it applies. I mean, this applies to both men and women, paying attention to your body. It's what I tell everybody. It's like, if you've stuck to it for a while and you slip and fall, the moment you go, I shouldn't have had this, pay attention. Notice what starts to hurt. Notice what starts to bother you. I know my knees will start to ache, and I'll have intestinal inflammations when I start having what I'm not supposed to. And that's where I go, yeah, that's right. This is why I don't want to eat that garbage.
Yeah. Mine is my pointer finger on my left hand. It starts hurting so much. Like it is in so much pain. And it's like, Leanne.
I haven't had a finger problem with that, but everyone's different. So pay attention to your body. Now, I also, as I mentioned, one of the reasons I wanted you on is January is World Carnivore Month. So I had lots of people on that are using carnivore for health purposes because they need that elimination. And yet I know that you are a strong proponent of including vegetables and so forth in your diet, especially for women. And everybody and everybody's different. And so I wanted to have you get into that and say, okay, well, here's the alternative view as to why for some women, you're going to need to have the nutrients that plants do offer.
Yeah, completely. And I think it really comes from where your hormones are at. I've seen a lot of my clients who do best on more of a carnivore eating style and a super, super, super low carb eating style are coming more from a high hormone place where they have high insulin, they have high glucose, they have a high DHEA, high testosterone, high estrogen. But the interesting thing is when it comes to amenorrhea, a lack of period, or constantly dieting for many, many years, oftentimes the clients that I'm working with actually have really, really low hormones, low estrogen, low testosterone, low DHEA. So we're trying to go the other route. And so much, and this isn't to say that people with high hormones don't do well on my protocol or people with low hormones don't do well on carnivore. I've done carnivore. It has not benefited me at all. It does the exact opposite of what I want. And so after I started eating keto, it was good. It was horrible those first 21 days. And then after the 21 days, it went really well for a couple of months. But the issue that started coming up is that, I was hungry all the time.
Yeah.
I was dizzy all the time. I was forcing myself to fast. I was craving carbohydrates. And as somebody who had an eating disorder, I started binging and purging again. And I didn't know how to manage all the things. And so because I was binging and purging and I was incorporating all these things, I was actually surprisingly feeling better on days where I ate carbohydrates on my ketogenic diet. And so I really went into the science and started to try to understand carbohydrate tolerance and what carbohydrates our body needs at what time of our cycle. And so because I hadn't gotten a cycle and I had no idea, I used the full moon and the new moon kind of as just like an anchor point.
Okay.
So on the full moon, let's pretend that it's my period. And on the new moon, let's pretend I'm ovulating. And so I started to create this cycle pretending that I had estrogen upswings and progesterone upswings at certain times in my cycle. And by starting to eat that way, I ended up getting my period back after 9 months. And so in order to understand how to best serve our bodies, we also have to understand that as a woman, you have different hormone levels at different times. And I think a lot of us just think we have a good amount of estrogen, a good amount of progesterone, and that's the way it is. But in fact, the first 5 or 6 days of your cycle, your hormones are quite low. And then around day 8 or 9, our estrogen starts to increase. And then after ovulation, it starts to decrease. There's a little pickup again on about day 20. On day 1 is your first day of bleed. And so your progesterone is pretty low until after ovulation. And after ovulation, it starts going up to day 20 and then goes down. And so we have to understand that estrogen and progesterone both need different things. They both have different functions. And so what I oftentimes see is that women will do really, really well on keto for like the first 10 days of their cycle. They have their bleed, they're dealing with pains. By day 2, they're like, I've got this. All they want is steak, like steak and butter and broccoli. But come day 26, it is a very different thing. And that's oftentimes where women fall off their ketogenic diet. They end up eating all the things. And then they're like, okay, I'll try again. And that's usually around day 3 or 4 of their cycle. And so it's really cool to start correlating our falling off the wagon with the exact times where our body's actually craving more carbohydrates.
Okay. Yeah. My wife, after partially reading your book and listening to the podcast, I have questions, and you've led into some of them already. So, of course, she wrote paragraphs, but anyway, what would you say to someone who wants to know what to do with food cravings, like wanting specific foods during that week or 2 before your period? Often I find there are times when I'm wanting all the food and my appetite increases. Why does it happen? And how can I best fuel my body and satisfy hormonal needs during those times?
Oh, such a good question. I love that question. So the reason that's happening is because our progesterone is increasing, and our progesterone actually also increases our temperature. And so that's usually why after about day, I would say 18 or so, we get more and more thirsty. And you might notice if you go to the gym or you work out, like you're drinking a lot more, you need more electrolytes during that time because you're sweating a lot more. The heat in your body that you're creating is just a lot hotter. And so just understanding that too, a lot of people on their ketogenic diet and women will not boost up their electrolytes during that time and start to feel even more flat, which causes them to have more cravings because they're not fueling properly when it comes to their electrolytes. And the reason you're craving carbohydrates is because we can find progesterone supporting nutrients or progesterone supporting foods that primarily have carbohydrates. And so your body, you know, for me especially, around day 19, 20, all I want are navel oranges. Like if you could just like give me an orange right now, I just want an orange. And I would ignore that like we do. It's like an orange, that's not keto. I'm not going to have an orange. And then day 20, day 21, day 22, by the time you get to day 26, you're no longer thinking oranges. You're thinking creamsicles with cake and carrots and blah, 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 potatoes, chips. Let's go to Chick-fil-A. And then it just like turns into this whole thing because really all you needed was the progesterone supporting food of an orange. And so I think we get into this, I'll just have it later, or I can't have that keto. I can't have that food because it's not keto. There are specific foods that are keto and that allow you to stay in that fat burning state. But then there are some foods like oranges, pumpkins, potatoes, squashes are really great in those last parts of your cycle. So if you boost that up, chances are you're not going to have those same cravings, that intensity. And also in the last part of your cycle, poultry is huge. And I think on keto, like I am totally guilty of this. I eat a lot of steak, like at least one steak a day. That at the end part of my cycle, I have to remind myself, Leanne, you got to have poultry, because that's going to help with my progesterone also. So it's really just about understanding that there are sections to your cycle and that you can eat at different times, different ways. And that by day 27, you might not actually be in a deep state of ketosis, but I like to say like, when your progesterone is high, you just require different things. And by having the orange or the poultry or broccoli is another really great one that's great for progesterone, we can support our bodies, which allow us to be in a deeper state of ketosis come day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. That's good to know that you got knowing what you need to feed. Makes a big difference if you say, oh, that's why. And now you can take care of it. It's the same with, anybody who's trying to lose weight, get healthy, and feel amazing, paying attention to your body and knowing how to properly give it the nutrition that it needs. Out of curiosity, what's in the poultry? Do you know that supports progesterone? Or is it just something about it?
I think that there are multiple, for the poultry especially, I think it's the multiple amino acids. I think it's, what amino acid is it? I think there's like 3 specifically that are a higher amount.
Okay.
It might come to me.
I know the feeling. Let's see here. The more food questions. There are also times I don't feel hungry, but eat out of habit. I find this to be cyclical during different times of the month. How do I know what is best for my body? Eating breakfast or lunch or skipping, for example. So, intermittent fasting, not forced fasting, but just eating when hungry. And make sure that I'm not overeating or undereating. Or does it not matter as long as I'm making good food choices?
It really depends on the woman and her history. The big challenge here is that we have to understand where you're coming from. If my client has been constantly dieting for years and years and years, and she hasn't really eaten in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, then my protocol is going to be very different than somebody who's not really been on a diet, has really been eating all the things, and has more of a high hormone profile. So it really depends, like I said, those different hormone profiles. For somebody who's constantly been under eating, my last recommendation is fasting. Because my approach to nutrition and really holistic approach is understanding that in order to heal the body, we need to eat things. And while fasting is such an amazing practice, if you have been under eating for years,
Yep.
fasting is probably not going to help. And there's
Right.
likely a cortisol imbalance there. And
Mhm.
by not eating, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to boost your nutrients.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to eat. So there's kind of a challenge there as it relates to just a podcast interview and,
Yep.
not working one-on-one. But the major thing is when you're hungry, eat. But sometimes when you're not hungry, you also need to eat.
Mhm.
Unless, and that's me talking to somebody who's been dieting forever and ever and
Right.
ever and really hasn't eaten a lot.
Yep.
So you really have to balance where you're coming from and what that thing is. For me, I'm actually training myself right now not to fast.
Mhm.
And it has been so incredibly challenging. I'm really trying to get my testosterone up. It's like the last hormone that just has been so stubborn and will not increase. I'm trying to increase my DHEA and my testosterone. And how I'm doing that is not fasting. And
Mhm.
so it's been so incredibly hard because I'm like, it's breakfast time. I hate breakfast. Why am I eating breakfast? This is dumb. I'm not hungry. But I found over the following weeks of me just having breakfast, I actually wake up and I'm like, okay, yeah, I could have some breakfast.
Mhm.
And so it really depends on where you're coming from.
Yeah. And which makes sense. I know women especially are chronic undereaters, because all we've been told is eat less, eat less, eat less, especially for women.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, no. You need to eat more, eat more, eat more, eat more. The example that Dr. Jason Fung gives, it's like, hey, if you run a coal plant and they cut your intake down to 1,000 tons from 3,000 tons, well, you're going to start shutting stuff down, and that's what happens to your body. It shuts down. Your hair isn't growing like it should. Your nails become brittle. Yes. You have to eat. Good thing I can say is that's not a problem with my wife. She's never been a dieter, so that's not a concern for her, which is great.
That's awesome. And yeah, so for her, it's really going to be the ebb and flow. And how do you know if you're overeating? Well,
Mm-hmm.
you're really full and you're uncomfortable and like, oops, how do I know if I'm undereating? I'm really hungry. And so she might have a really good sense, but then it comes into really the message is day 2 of your cycle, you're probably not going to be that hungry. Mm-hmm. Day 26 of your cycle, give yourself some leeway there to understanding that you're probably going to be a lot hungrier and eat like massively more than day 2.
Mm-hmm. And which I think that's another thing that scares women. It's like, you mean I'm supposed to eat a lot of food during, aren't I supposed to stick to X number of calories per day? Well, no, because as we've already discussed, day 2 is different than day 26. Your body has different needs. It's something I don't have to worry about. My needs stay the same pretty much most of the time with that, but women are completely different, and you have to eat more at certain times in your cycle because you need the extra nutrients during those time frames.
Exactly. And I think, men and women too, outside of hormones, the thoughts we think, the people that we're around, the activities that we're doing, all of these things are influencing the foods that we need, the nutrients that we need. If I'm having a really stressful day, I'm going to eat completely different than if I'm just chilling out, looking at the ocean.
Yeah.
So that all informs, there was actually, the first time I did reverse dieting was in 2015 and we had gone to Cuba. I'm Canadian, so we get to do that. It's really great. We had gone to Cuba and I was reverse dieting in Cuba at the beach, and I was eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, all these foods, sitting in my bathing suit, eating all the things. And I was like, this is the best place to reverse diet. And that was really relaxing to be able to eat a whole bunch of things while being relaxed. But you might find during stressful periods, you're not hungry and you just you can't even bother. You just want your coffee. And so it's important to understand that there's going to be differences in your intake just based on lifestyle and what's going on, how high your stress level is, and what's happening on a daily basis.
Yeah. Every day's different. That's for certain.
Yeah.
And I also when you're talking about how you're trying to get into eating breakfast again, once you start getting into a habit, your body learns, like you said, because I've done it in the past too, where it's like, I'm going to start incorporating breakfast, even though I'm not hungry. But then I start waking up going, oh yeah, because your body gets used to that intake so that you can increase if necessary.
Yes, and then I find my lunches and dinners are so much smaller, and that was another reason is like my bowel movements weren't as regular as I wanted them to be, and I noticed that my lunches and dinners were huge, like just ginormous and issues. So now by having breakfast, I'm really eating the same amount. I'm just separating it out further in the day so my meals are smaller and my bowel movements are better, and so yeah, it's all related, and it's different things at different times. Will I be using this practice in 6 months? Probably not.
Right.
But it's good to use now, and it's a tool that we have. And once it's done what it needed to do, then I don't need it anymore.
Yep. It's a tool in your tool belt to use when it is needed.
Yeah.
Now, do you find your sleep is improved by not eating as much at lunch and dinner, or any change there?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that you asked that question. So I started this experiment a couple of weeks ago, and I've always been a 10-hour sleeper since starting keto. Like I sleep for 10 hours, I go to bed, I wake up probably usually around 8 a.m. Since adjusting my meals and doing breakfast, lunch, dinner, I'm going to bed and I'm waking up exactly at 8 hours at 5:45 in the morning. And it is driving my husband crazy because that's his quiet time. And I'm like, hey babe, what's going on? I'm ready for the day. I'm up. So it's been really interesting. I don't want to correlate it 100% yet. I need a little bit more time, but I found that very interesting. I hadn't really changed anything else but breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I'm like, boing, 8 hours and I'm ready to go. So it'll be interesting to see if that adjusts.
Tell your husband I feel his pain. When my wife gets up early and I'm not, it's like, don't talk. Hi, love you. Coffee, drink. That's about. So I feel his pain.
Exactly.
Now, why in the world would a woman want to increase her testosterone as you're trying to do? Isn't that for men?
We actually need a good amount of testosterone, mostly for our sex drive, our energy, building muscle. I was finding I work out, I live on a boat full time. And so I'm constantly like doing just life stuff, lifting heavy things, ropes over the back, that sort of thing. And I noticed over the last year, like I've had a really hard time, not only building muscle, but maintaining muscle. And testosterone is really big for that. And my testosterone is like super low. And DHEA is a precursor to testosterone. So oftentimes people will supplement with DHEA, and and it just wasn't increasing on its own. I've tried like testosterone itself. That was horrible. It made my skin so bad. I hated every minute of it. So I really try to come at it from the natural side. And sometimes I do actually use the hormone itself, but then you're not actually encouraging the body. So it's really important for us to have testosterone, specifically muscle development, just our basic sex drive, and having that ebb and flow, even in our cycle, is a really healthy thing also. So yes, testosterone is required for both males and females.
Which I knew that, obviously.
Yeah.
So are you using more food to help increase that? Is that your primary source to try to do that?
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, I was taking a DHEA supplement and I switched over to, it's called Libido Stim. It has a bunch of herbs, which actually increase testosterone naturally. I've kind of, when I had a cortisol dysregulation or adrenal dysfunction, had a really hard time with herbs because my cortisol was so low. So it's been fun, like we were saying, as this one thing heals, this protocol can shift, and this one thing heals, this other protocol can shift. So I'm using a combination of herbs, also really getting in tune with my cycle, even more so. And then also I'm doing the 3 meals a day, not fasting, and just functional movement. So I've been trying to lift more heavy things than normal. Caffeine also, in the form of, I just started doing a new, it's amazing. It's called Golden Ratio. Have you heard of this? It's a new company. They make golden coffee, and it's slow roasted at low temperatures. And normally I can't handle caffeine, but dang, this stuff is good and it is smooth and delicious. So I've been using that also. So we'll see. It's a new adventure. And I'll learn as I go.
Now I got to go find some coffee.
Yeah, seriously.
Not at this time of the evening, but in the morning.
Yes. Oh, and also for testosterone too, B vitamins, having proper B function is really, really important. Knowing, B12, especially for people, can be really low. So understanding our folate, our B12 levels can be really, really helpful. Yeah. So I just wanted to add that too, because B vitamins are a big thing and people don't often supplement with them.
And am I remembering correctly, some people can't properly methylate B vitamins?
Yes, if you have the MTHFR mutation, it's really important to have the methyl B12 and also to supplement with folate. But if you have MTHFR, the way that you process folate is going to be a challenge. So going for a high dose folate is not a good idea. You want to start like low, like 400 micrograms, but most supplements are like 5,000. So it takes a little while to find, but I'm telling you, it will cause anxiety, depression, as far as suicidal thoughts, if you're on too high of a methylfolate as an MTHFR. Speaking from experience, personal experience, it was not pleasant. So make sure if you have the MTHFR mutation, or if you don't know, start low and slow with methylfolate, because it's nothing to be played around with.
And there is a relatively inexpensive way to test for the MTHFR mutation, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, Trent is really good at this. So, but yeah, how I found out that I had it was I did a 23andMe and they gave me the raw data, and then I just uploaded it to another site and found out about it.
It told you right there.
Yeah.
Because I know Kerry Brown has the same issue.
Yes.
I think Danny Vega does too, but it doesn't affect him like it does. I think he has the MTHFR mutation, but his body doesn't express it like it does for most people. So it's there, but it doesn't bother. I know. All those muscles, but anyway.
Seriously.
Now, you mentioned earlier that obviously various forms of birth control that women use shouldn't touch them. So some people that are looking at family planning, what are your recommendations to other than, hormonal birth control options?
Yeah. Track your cycle. There's an amazing book. What is it? Taking Charge of Your Fertility. It will change your life. I love this book. It is so good. It's so good. Taking Charge of Your Fertility. I read this when I went off hormonal birth control. Read this. I had amenorrhea, so I didn't really need to worry about it, but it was very nice to learn how all of that worked. And that's what we currently do for my husband and I. And as long as you understand your cycle and you understand where things are at, it's a pretty good success rate. There's always that like, oh, maybe, but that's kind of what I would go toward. If you really need hormonal birth control, the copper IUD is a lot better than hormonal based products. I cannot in my right mind ever suggest orally based hormonal birth control. Just understanding what it does in the body, the artificial hormones that it's giving you on a daily basis, your inability to know where your cycle is at, where your hormones are at, it completely shuts down that whole system. I wouldn't personally do it.
Yeah. And everybody's got their own choice. Now for women that haven't had a cycle for ages, would that book also be beneficial for them to prepare for what's to come if they're trying to get things working again?
I don't know if Taking Charge of Your Fertility is good in regards to people that have amenorrhea or don't have a cycle. Amenorrhea is not having a cycle. If you have like PCOS and you're not having a cycle because of that, then that's a different protocol. But Taking Charge of Your Fertility is really about understanding when you're most fertile and when you're not. So you could read that book as like #period goals or fertility goals, just like wanting to measure that stuff and kind of getting into the groove. But I think if you're not having a cycle, the most important thing is to eat, and incorporate lots of fats and lots of proteins and lots of greens, and cycling in your carbohydrates and cycling in your foods. And by cycling in, what I mean by that is just, again, use the full moon as your, like you can pick, use the full moon as your ovulation or your period. The new moon is ovulation or period, and just use that as a cycle to get yourself into the groove of like, okay, it's the full moon, it's period time, even though you're not having a period, to kind of get yourself in the groove. If you think about, when the full moon is out and the light is out, you can have a little light in your bathroom that's on
Right.
and just shining into your room to kind of create that. So you're just getting in the groove of cycling your body, even though it's not currently cycling.
It kind of jump starts it, for lack of better, to help get you going and say, okay, because some of it is, I mean, as you think of things and work through it, I mean, there's a mental aspect to it also.
Huge.
I'm
You got to
working
fake it
on
till you
this.
make it. Exactly. And there is a huge mindset shift that needs to occur also. Like we were talking about testosterone earlier. And one of the big things with testosterone is your mindset and your stress. And I think a lot of times women, their hormones are really messed up, and mine were also a lot to do with, of course, not eating a lot, but also just how much stress I was under, my spiritual health. All of these things contribute to our hormone profile, and our hormones are so incredibly sensitive to every little thing. Like, and this, if you're having a cycle or you remember having a cycle, like there are cycles you have that are the worst, and then cycles that you have that are okay. Like that is all informing what's going on in your life. So really having a positive mindset and looking at things and trying not to stress about the little things, and even trying not to stress about the big things, can go a really, really long way.
So stress has come up quite a bit in the last minute or two. So let's just get into that in general. What are some ways that to help either mitigate that, whether it's through food and or other methods to, because some people are different than others. I mean, I know my wife, just from eating a low carb diet, has helped with a lot of things, with emotional and so forth in that. So I'll just get into that a little bit too.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about fasting, and if you're coming from really a stressed body state, that fasting may not be the best option for you. Like, I think signs and intermittent fasting isn't good for you because it ties so aligned with stress. Like if you are a woman who is supposed to be cycling, and then all of a sudden you're not eating a bunch, like all of a sudden you're going 18, 24, 36, 48 hours without food. If during your fasting, you're feeling like really high, like almost jittery, that's a sign that you're not actually benefiting your body. If you already have hypothyroid symptoms, that could be a sign also that intermittent fasting or long-term fasting might not be good for you. If you've lost your appetite, that's another sign that the fasting is actually causing more stress, where you're like, I'm really not hungry. I'm really not hungry. I'm really not hungry. And that continues over and over again. If you are showing signs of imbalanced hormones, like especially acne around your bottom cheek area, that could be a sign. And so it's kind of important to know that stress can display in your body, even though you think you're doing everything quote unquote right. If you are waking up in the middle of the night, or all of a sudden your sleep pattern goes from, having like 10 hours of sleep to down to 4, or you can't get to sleep, or you're all jittery, these are signs that the stress is getting to be too much. As is just simple bowel movements. Like I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with, personal experience. When I wake up and I'm just like out the door running around, you don't really have time to poo. So if you're noticing that your bowel movements are all off, that's another good sign for stress. And so how do we fix these things? Well, my personal practice and what I recommend all my clients do is to start the morning slow. If that means that you have to wake up like 20 minutes earlier to wake up, sit down, have a tea, read your Bible, hang out, don't jump right on social media, just like take your time, warm up, like read some poetry, just sit and like watch the birds outside your window, just chill. That can go a long ways. And I think too, if you have time to like grab your phone and jump on social media, you have time to go for a 5-minute walk. You have time to like sit on a park bench and watch a dog play with grass. Like, I think it's just like pausing. Like, I'm really grateful for the life that I live, because oftentimes I'm in the middle of nowhere on the ocean around nobody. So I have a lot of time to just stare at legit nothing. And it's actually really healthy to just do nothing. And I think a lot of us, specifically women, have a really hard time like, but I have to be doing something. I have to be doing this or have to
Yes.
be doing that. It's really getting out of that mindset of like, I just need to chill and just like be like, before this interview, I literally just like sat and did nothing.
Yep.
And it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the doing nothingness is quite healthy. And a lot of people say, no, you could like go lift weights, and there's time and space for that. And I'm sure you're doing that or walking or something, but sometimes it's just like the doing nothing that we have a really hard time with.
It is. Yeah. I know that there's times, you know, my wife's like, I need to do something. It's like,
Well,
no, you can sit there and do nothing. It's perfectly fine. But there, you know, the world today, we have to always be busy. No, my evenings are usually sitting there,
yes.
and getting attacked by the kids. But you know, it's just sit down, you relax, dinner's over, take it easy for a little bit. And also, speaking of you know, fasting and stress, I don't think people realize that fasting is a stress on your body, because you know, like we were talking, those 3, 4, 5 day fasts. Well, especially the chronic dieter, that's not going to be good, because now the body's going, oh, here she goes again.
Yep.
And that's going to again start throwing off hormones, and that can start shutting down cycle, because the body's going to again shut things down to survive if it doesn't think it's going to get the food and nutrition that it needs. So again, that's another stressor I don't think a lot of women understand.
And then they wonder why they're not losing weight. And it's like, you're in a famine. Your body's like, hold on to everything, hold on to it all. And so I think that's a big thing. And it's something that I'm still training my body to do. Even after doing so much healing, I then get into this long-term fasting, and I'm doing so much fasting. I'm like, more fasting is better. Fasting. And then I start to gain weight, and I'm like, oh, Leanne, you can't do this. So it is a delicate balance, and every body is different. And so it's important to drop the pride. That's a big one. With fasting and keto and low carb is like, but how long have you fasted, bro? Like, it's a big deal to try to beat your friends at the fasting. And I think I went out with a couple keto friends a couple months ago, and they were like, yeah, we'll go for lunch. I was like, what about breakfast? And they're like, huh?
Yeah.
Like I had like said something so bad, you know? But I think it's important to understand that fasting can be stressful on the body if you're coming from a depleted state.
Yeah. And I know that I've seen Dr. Tro say a couple more than once that he has patients that literally break down and cry. We're talking obese patients, because he's like, you're not eating enough food. And they're like, I'm 300, 400, 500 pounds. What are you talking about? You're not eating enough food. That's why you're not losing weight. Because the body's holding on to that fat, thinking I'm starving. And of course, that's what we've been taught our whole lives. So eat less is better, and it's not. Sometimes eating a whole lot more of it will greatly benefit the body.
Yeah, I love Gary Taub's new book, A Case for Keto, because he talks about that very thing. It's like not how much you eat, but what you eat.
Yeah.
And that's been so pivotal to my own experience, you know, coming from a 1,200 calorie life, and through upregulating, reverse dieting, all these things. Like, there are days, I mean, when I'm doing a reverse dieting, 4,000, 5,000 calories, easy, like easy. And I never, ever, ever, ever thought in a million years that I would be able to do that or say that or function at that. But it's really interesting to see how the body can upregulate and the metabolism can completely change because of those foods.
When you're doing those reverse dieting, eating that much, what are you eating to get that 4,000 or 5,000 calories? Is it, you know, meat heavy with some veggies, or does it depend on your mood of the day?
It's meat heavy with a lot of veggies, and depending on when my cycle is, there's carbohydrates in there too. Usually in the form of like sweet potato, plantains, squashes, a lot of pumpkin, oranges, fruits, those sorts of things. And then come day 1 to 10, then I go like hardcore keto, and I do all of that with keto protocol. But it's like, it's a lot of nuts and seeds also, like chia pudding and that sort of thing. And steak, a lot of steak.
I have yet to cook a steak on a boat in the middle of the ocean, but maybe I'll have to paddle out and visit one day.
Yeah, we would love that. 100%.
So I would assume that from what you just said, your carb level varies depending on time of the month. Lower sometimes, higher others. Is there a range that you normally recommend, or is that going to be client, person specific?
I think a healthy range for most people is anywhere between 20 to 40 grams of carbs.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be total or net, depending on where you're at in your cycle. And so, and depending on what you're going on, like we talked about reverse dieting and everything. And sometimes, depending on the day, sometimes I'm upwards of 150 grams of carbs. I wear a CGM often to try to figure out that. And actually I did a CGM experience a couple months ago, and I was like, how many carbs can I get away with and keep my glucose regulated? So I had 4 bananas and a third of a cup of almond butter with a ton of cinnamon, and my glucose only increased by 3 points. And so, what? And it's all about just that balance of our macronutrients. And so just to get back to your question, 20 to 40 grams of carbs, total or net, depending on where you're going. So if you want to do total grams of carbs at 20, that's all you're having. But then if during that time where you want to incorporate more carbohydrates, you do 20 grams net, then you have like 20 or 30 extra grams of fiber to kind of play around with, where you're probably going to be sitting around 40 to 50 total. And the same goes with 40 grams. If that's kind of your goal, then it's 40 grams total often. And then when you're doing more high carbs, it's 40 grams net. So you might, depending on fiber, be upwards of 60 or 70 total grams. And you can kind of ebb and flow within that kind of range.
Okay. And I would assume you recommend with using whole foods for that, because you can play the net carb games with garbage in the stores, and that drives me bonkers personally. It's like they throw stuff in there. It's like, look, there's 12 types of wheat, but since it's technically fiber, it's like, no, you just ingested a piece of bread.
No. Yeah, I totally agree. I think you can play the carbohydrate game with things like chia or hemp or flax or beans, and kind of play that game with it. Even like the chickpea, like, do you know when you open up a can of chickpeas, it's called aquafaba. It's like the gooey stuff on chickpeas. Play around with that, understanding how that works, how your body responds to that, how you can play with like whole foods. Dates even, when I have dates with almond butter and cinnamon, I can keep my glucose completely stable. And so that helps support my estrogen, keeps my glucose completely stable, is high in fiber, and so much better than, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to have this low carb snack with erythritol, and the glucose spikes up like crazy. And then what happens? You crash down and you want more carbohydrates. And so you kind of have to balance it out. And it's all just really about understanding your body and what you react to and what you need. And I'm all for whole foods as opposed to going to the grocery store and buying some keto garbage snack.
Yeah. They're great for a treat. That's, with kids, we will make, on a rare occasion, a couple times a year, birthdays, we'll make a cake of some kind. But again, we're going to use the high quality ingredients when we do it. We're not buying a lot of the stuff that's on the marketplace that they slap keto on the front, but you flip it over and you look at the ingredients going, yeah, but it says cane sugar right there.
Yeah.
Which I've seen. It's like, no. It's
so backwards. It's just, I think we've lost sight of just so many things. And I remember when I started keto in 2014, sharing this stuff on the internet, people got really angry because you're like, you're talking about carbohydrates. How is this keto? And it's like, but you guys are eating like granola that's like got all this garbage in it. And you can't tell me that that's healthier than if I am craving something sweet, I'm having a medjool date like how, I don't understand.
And and that's why I like to stick with, I understand the net carbs with relation to whole foods. That's not as big of a deal, but too many people play the net carb game with the processed stuff. And that's where I see the trouble. That's why I tell people generally better off sticking with whole or total carbs, because then you can't play that game. It's a protection for those that have the sweet tooth that they need to feed. Oh, wait, this is 36. It's a net of 4, but it's 36. I want to set it
So
down.
I'll have 4 of them.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up because like my community is so engrossed in all things whole foods, and I definitely attract a certain type of like holistically interested human that I rarely have to say that, but yes, 100% yes.
So it's a challenge. We understand that. And people will you learn as you go. That's something I think everybody, men or women, have to understand. You're going to stumble, you're going to fall. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back at it. Learn what works best for your body. Everyone's different. Especially working with clients, every client has a different need, different issue, and you just take it one step at a time.
Yes, couldn't have said it better myself.
So, are you by chance working on anything? Anything coming up that you can? I don't know or not. I'm just asking.
Yeah. I'm kind of in this like beautiful space right now where I'm doing just a couple of things, and it's been like a decade of me being online, hustling. And I learned last year that when I push myself too hard, bad things happen all around. So I'm currently working one-on-one with clients. I take anywhere from 5 to 8 clients a month. Just super chill. I'm doing a 6-week keto weight loss group coaching program every couple of months, which you can find on Healthful Pursuit, my blog. And yeah, I really like, other than just cruising and chilling, and I'm just taking it easy and not pushing myself. I'm sure 2022 will be a crazy year. So I'm just taking a moment because I haven't, and that will also increase my testosterone too.
Yeah. And that's another thing I think people need to learn. Like we said, we got to take that pause daily. Sometimes in our lives in general, you just have to step back.
Yeah.
Set stuff aside. I mean, I go crazy working full time, trying to run side businesses. And, it's nice to get away for a few days and just chill out and take it easy, or in your case, take 2021 to settle down. And, but that also gives you time to plan and prepare for, hey, I'd like to do this. And you work into that coming up. So that's something in general we really need to learn and apply to our lives.
Completely.
So what's one simple tip that you would offer somebody, and I will say in particular women, that are considering the simple low carb lifestyle or getting into keto, and they're not sure, or maybe they're into it and they're within that first 21 days. We already know what to tell them with that. Keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Just one simple tip that you'd offer.
Yeah, I think get really comfortable with new foods. Like go to the grocery store and just be curious. Like get out of the middle sections of the grocery store and go to the outskirts. Go to the go to a beautiful grocery store. Even if you don't buy anything, like go to the fanciest store and look at their produce, and maybe bring your phone and Google like, what do I do with parsnips, and what's an endive, what is this, and what is a rutabaga, and just get really comfortable around different types of fruits and vegetables, because you'll find on the ketogenic diet that they're actually like okra, for example. I tried okra like 3 years into my keto life, and I was like, why didn't anyone tell me about this stuff? So I think it's like getting really comfortable with different types of vegetables and produce that you maybe shy away from, like bok choy. What do I do with that? And just start, maybe go to your regular grocery store after you've looked at the bougie one and see what they have available. I always like going to the bougie ones and seeing what they have available. And learn how to prepare bok choy. And then the next week, learn how to prepare rutabaga. Ooh, this kind of tastes like potato. I wonder what would happen if I added turnip to this too. Oh, that milded it down. And like just getting more comfortable with different types of vegetables, that it's not the corn, carrots, peas situation.
Radishes are a great substitute for potatoes also.
Yes. So
and
good.
For those listening in the Southeast, she's not talking about fried okra. Just going to throw that out there. It's
so true. It's so true. Thanks for that. Although you can cover it with pork rinds and fry it really and make a crumbly thing, and it's really good.
Yep. Just not what you think of in the Southeast.
It's so true.
Living there, it's like, that's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, no, not the stuff you normally eat down here. One simple recipe that or meal that you like to have living low carb. Obviously, it's steak.
Steak. Oh, okay. Something to put on steak that completely changes the game. Chimichurri. Like Nobody thinks about chimichurri, and chimichurri is so simple. It's so easy to make. You literally just take parsley and take off all the leaves, put it in your blender, blend it up, put it in a bowl, add oil of your choice. Like it could be olive oil, macadamia nut oil, avocado oil. You just pour it in, add some salt, pepper. Ooh, if you want to get crazy, some oregano or some oregano oil, and it will stay in the fridge for like a week. It's high fat. It makes everything taste good. And I forgot the garlic. Don't forget the garlic. It is just the best thing. I eat so much chimichurri and have a bunch of fun with different types of herbs, and it's just good stuff. So chimichurri.
Well, shameless plug with my Select Savory seasonings. I have a chimichurri seasoning.
Yay!
It's paprika, black pepper, parsley, garlic, basil, lemon, peel, oregano, thyme, and aji amarillo.
That sounds delicious.
And for those that do listen, they'd already know it's all sugar-free, additive-free. That's why I started it, because try to find a barbecue rub without sugar in a grocery store. Yeah. And I, 3 years ago, said, that's it. I'm done. Start my own company.
Good for you. That's awesome.
And that's actually, I added it because somebody asked for it. They're like, hey, that would be nice to have. I said, okay, I'll find it.
I'll do it.
Where can people find you?
Yeah.
If they want to reach out?
Completely. You can find me on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. I really like Instagram. You can find me at Leanne Vogel. That's Leanne, V as in Victor, Ogel. And then I have a blog, healthfulpursuit.com. I also have a podcast, the Keto Diet Podcast. I'm on YouTube as Leanne Vogel, Facebook as Healthful Pursuit. But yeah, Instagram's like
your home.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure that's in the show notes for everybody so they can find that too. And you got a couple of good books out there also. As we mentioned before starting, my wife I bought for my wife your Keto for Women book. And you've got 2 other ones, correct?
Yeah, I have. I launched the Keto Diet, the first one, so crazy, in 2017. And then the Keto Diet Cookbook, which is a meal planning program that you can go through to kind of plan out how to structure your meals and your family's meals. And then Keto for Women, which came out last year, that really helps women with all the things we're just talking about and more as it relates to all of the hormone imbalances, digestive imbalances, nervous system. I mean, it's all covered in there. So it's really fun stuff. So
anyone out there that got done listening to this going, but I have more questions. You got 2 choices. Go buy Keto for Women or become a client. You'll be all set.
Yes. Yeah. You can find out more client details on healthfulpursuit.com. And I just love working with women one-on-one. And it's just so great, like you said, to see how every body is different and how hormone tests come back. And I'm constantly learning about different varieties of things that can happen. So it's great.
I can imagine. Well, thanks for joining me. I enjoyed the conversation, and I know everyone else is going to like it too.
Thanks so much for having me, Corey.
Thanks. Have a great day.